So I don't know how much I want to talk about LCS playoffs anymore, but we should talk a little bit about Champions Queue because we haven't done it since the Olay episode. And I think there's some interesting things to dissect here, as now everybody is like, this player says Champions Queue isn't working and no one's playing it and blah, 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 because there's some very weird obsessions, and like Papa Smithy's come out and said, like, don't witch hunt my players, etc., or don't witch hunt players. Players have different ways of practicing. And I think that there's a lot to actually have a more sober take or middle ground take here. So what are your thoughts, Thorin, on the whole Champions Queue debacle right now?
First of all, I will say, I will actually agree with Papa Smithy. I don't think that the logic should go like this. A player hasn't played much Champions Queue, therefore he is not practicing enough, therefore he doesn't care about winning, therefore he shouldn't have that job / I am going to witch hunt him. Obviously, it goes without saying, like, I'll give you an example. If you're Bjergsen, I don't give a fuck if you ever play a single Champions Queue game. As long as you do your solo queue, as long as you do your scrims, as long as you play well in the game, that's fine. I will say, if you are a fucking rookie or someone who's borderline, you better be in that fucking Champions Queue just for the optics, mate. You better look like you're working hard, like you're trying to fight for the spot. But I also do think, this is one thing I want to briefly call out, right? When people on these shows, we do these topics, which are the classic ones of why NA sucks and why they won't be as good as Koreans. I've noticed, Monty, one of the reasons fans love it, actually, you'd think they'd hate it, right? NA fans would hate it. No, because what they do in their mind is this, Monty. They're with us on that side. They think they're sat with us and we're all Gordon Ramsay going, this isn't good enough. Like, it should be better, you bloody, it's all raw and that. They don't realise, wait a minute, guys. You know how the culture of these players means they'll never be as diligent as the Koreans and the Chinese. They'll never put in the same hours. They'll never be able to even mentally handle the strain. That's you as well, the fan. So I'm getting sick and tired of American fans being like, these players aren't even bloody playing all hours of the day. If I was a pro, you wouldn't do any of that if you're a pro, because you're all Americans. You would also be resting on your laurels. You'd also be a sick LeBlanc player and go, I don't need to do that. I don't play LeBlanc. Like, I'm just going to get my solo queue hours up. You'd all be doing that. So first of all, stop taking yourself out of the equation. You're all like that. And then secondly, for pro players, same thing applies. Monty, in about 4 different esports now, I have heard over 10 years of NA pros tell me the same thing. Scrims all suck. Nah, none of them play properly. They won't even actually like have a proper pool, and then people don't turn up, and then they just didn't you, and then they leave the screen. That's all of you. You're talking about yourselves, you morons. Half of you were on that guy's team last year. Eventually you all have to get together and look in the mirror and go, oh fuck, it's us. Wait, you mean if I fix things and lead by example, other people might follow me? Because that's the thing I always found whack, dude. You know, back in the day when everyone used to say like, oh, people like Bjergsen are so diligent, they're practicing all the time. Is it ever going to rub off on any teammates? Have you ever thought of going to a guy and being a leader and be like, mate, I notice you're having problems here. Come practice with me a bit. Let's get a few duos in. Let's get some games going. Let's turn it around. Why is everyone just like an individual egotist just fucking getting paid millions and at the end going, nothing I could do, region shit? You are the region. The fans of the region are the region. The pro players are the region. The coaches are the region. The fucking up-and-coming players are the future of the region. You have to solve this, guys. Because as I said on the rant on the other show, like, it's all well and good being like, but Thorin, we have to work smarter, not harder. You can't even work hard at the moment. Let me see you work hard, then we can figure out working smart.
And also, part of it is just simply the server, guys. There just aren't as many players to be competitive in North America as there are in Europe and Korea. However, here's some things that boost up your point, Thorin. So let's just take other games, for example. Let's take Counter-Strike. Well, there was a team of Brazilians led by Fallen who came from Brazil, then they came to North America, which was notoriously shitty for scrims in Counter-Strike at the time, and then they won a major.
They became the number 1 team in the world, yeah.
So they are literally a team in a North American region, which has never been a good region for Counter-Strike as a whole. They've won 1 major ever in Counter-Strike history, North America. And yet this team came to a North American practice environment and then translated that to becoming the best in the world. That's mentality.
Mate, I've got a punchline for you, because when you find out what they explain as to how they did it, the whole thing, this is the Gordian knot being chopped here, boys, right? I once asked Fallen and Zeus, the coach and the star and the in-game leader, how did you do it? Like, how do you get good practice if you know the opponent isn't good practice and he's not going to play like the European teams do, who were the equivalent of our Koreans in Counter-Strike? And they said, no, we took that into account. If we were playing an online scrim on like 8 high ping, then what we would do is we wouldn't just take like an easy kill that we can get just because of the ping and the fact that the guy's shit. We would play as if it was a real team on LAN. We would play correctly, like certain scenarios, we would essentially just force ourselves to be disciplined, so that then when we got to the real top teams, they did play that way and it worked. I know that sounds mad, but that is what you have to do. I get the vibe, Monty, that it has never changed. That to this day, there are players trying to win the scrim to boost their own ego and show the other guy he's shit. It's 2022. That's still a thing. It is, though. And so, unfortunately, I get the feeling like they still don't get its practice, you know. They still don't get what practice is.
So that's an example of a team in North America being able to translate North American, which still was not, in a different game, was not the peak of competition. Here's another one example for you. Right now in Rainbow Six, there are Korean teams that are becoming significantly better and are starting to become dangerous at international level, despite the fact that nobody in Korea plays fucking Rainbow Six. Okay?
Yeah.
So the fact that Damwon Kia has a team that's like topping groups at the Six Invitational this last year is because it's a work ethic thing, and it's not necessarily the level of competition is a factor, and it is worse objectively in NA. But I'm just telling you, here's an example of a team that did it in NA to become the world's best in Counter-Strike. Yes. And here's an example of a very low population of players in Asia in Rainbow Six. And now these Korean teams are starting to make deep runs at international tournaments. They're not winning yet, but they're certainly overperforming based on the number of players within that region. Right?
By the way, I've heard when you're in a team like that, because remember, DRX is like a real org. It's obviously the team that has a great League of Legends team. When you're in an org like that, they don't care that you're not in League of Legends. You still practice all day long like everyone else does.
Yeah, they're in the Damwon Kia facility in Seoul with the LoL team, you know?
Oh, yes, it was Damwon, not DRX. That goes without saying. Like, if you're a Korean pro, that is just expected of you. So the point here is, I have never said Westerners should be like Koreans. I actually don't think you should, by the way. I think it'll ruin your life. My problem is I don't know how you make up the gap. And Champions Queue was an interesting idea, but there's the other thing we should talk about, right? Obviously, it turns out, like the Ole episode was a good example. He said either you couldn't queue or it'd be like, I've heard some people say the matchmaking and it was bad, like it didn't match up, etc. Like, what are your thoughts overall as a tool? Do you actually think it's beneficial? I'm kind of a bit 50-50. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Ole, one of Ole's complaints when he was on the show was that the teams were often unbalanced because it doesn't necessarily, like the ELO system, as I understand it, is based off of wins and losses, and you get more for winning than losing. So it's a factor of how many games you play a lot of the time. And so the teams would be unbalanced, which I think is why a lot of pro players don't like it. But I think objectively, having a gated, private, low ping solo queue or like practice environment is a huge advantage that other regions just don't have, right? If you're trying to get away from one-trick ponies and all of these other kind of lower tier players or players who abuse the regular matchmaking systems in order to get into the higher echelons of LP, then I would think that this would be a better environment than solo queue if it was actually used to its fullest potential. Now, I think probably there are ways Riot could make it better, but I think it's better than what any of the other regions have. And it's financially incentivized too, so you can make money by playing it. It just seems good all around, frankly. I don't know why you would complain. Like, Riot gave the players everything that they had been complaining about for years. Oh, the ping's too high, which was always a bullshit excuse, guys. It was always bullshit. That was never real. Like, yeah, the ping affects it, but you can still practice on 60 ping. It's not the end of the universe. And I just don't know what else they want at this point in time. Like, there was always some other excuse as to why these things couldn't be done, and now it's here. They were setting up in-houses beforehand, but then that, they wouldn't do that. And like Riot wouldn't let you stream the in-houses. So players didn't want to do that because they wanted to stream in solo queue in their off hours. So it's all gone now. They gave you everything. They built you a tool. And
what about this? Here's the problem. That's exactly the issue, Monty, is what they say is not what they want. Yeah. I learned this in Counter-Strike. If people don't know, me and Monty went and did an actual league giving away $2 million a year, and we did all these things that all these players and talent told us they wanted. They told us they wanted things like transparency as to what you were doing. They told us they wanted like net 30 days to be paid within. When we did all these things, we found it didn't move the needle a fucking inch. Nobody really wanted it. It was just something they thought they wanted or said they wanted, but didn't in reality matter. So in the same sense, right? Think of the history of North American League of Legends. It goes like this. I was there at the beginning, at least after the first year or so. It goes like this, right? Why do we need to live in team houses? I don't need to. We're on the best team, so we don't need a team house. That's for the other guys. Coaches, no one could coach me. I know everything about the game. Then it was like, oh, boot camps. I mean, I guess we could do it. Like, mate, the joke is they always like claim, like, well, if I had this, or do I even need that? Like, it's just people giving an excuse to stay where they are now. Because that's the thing, like you said, if the main thing was ping, they'd all be in Champions Queue all the time, by definition. It's the only way you can play low ping. Remember, Monty, they used to always say, how am I supposed to practice my Yasuo combos when Faker is on 9 ping? Go to Champions Queue. Nah, but then the matchmaker. Exactly. Now we've found out what's more important to you. It's more important not to play on low ping, but to not have bad matchmaking. Or to be able to know, is another factor, I think, in solo queue, when you think the matchmaking scuffed, you just forget about the game, you don't care, do you? But the problem is, people are going to judge you how you play in Champions Queue. Like, that's the problem, in my opinion, mate. Like, you can give people as many tools as you want. They've got to eventually take some, like, self-responsibility and do something with those tools, or explain why the tool doesn't work. Don't just go, it doesn't work, so I'm just not playing it. Well, then how does that progress any of us? It doesn't. It puts you back to square one, mate. Because I agree, mate. You give it the problem with NA people in general, it's actually the problem with NA as a country. You have too much by default, which makes you not value what you have, and therefore not understand how anyone would even get to that point to then get all the rest. And so what happens is, just like in this scenario, I don't think people get this, Monty. You know when everyone talks about how, like, oh, in Korea they have every advantage. They have all the esports industry and the low ping. Yeah, and you know half the guys that have beaten your ass and won the world championship were like a runaway kid who was a 15-year-old who had nothing in his life. He didn't even finish school. He went all in on a children's video game, and he practiced it till his eyes bloody bled, and at the end he won the championship. And you're like, well, he is the privileged one. Like, you guys can't fucking do it. Meanwhile, the American player grows up middle class family, nice PC, no PC ban. Yes. Oh, he got, you know, that's right, mum and dad, I'm good on solo queue. Can I take a year off uni? Yeah, of course, you can start it next year. And then that guy goes, I am the disadvantaged one. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you. That's
it's actually so true, Thorin. I was going to mention this too, which is like, it is also a lot of players, and we've said this before in Korea, and I'm not going to name all the names because that's their fucking business and not yours necessarily. But I know many players in League of Legends who, have won titles, LCK, champions, worlds, who are like supporting their siblings and their families. They're supporting their parents and their siblings on their salaries. And if they get kicked off this team, there is no more money and they don't have an education. So that's it, right? In America, because now, this is possible in Korea because PC bongs are so cheap. And it's also possible in other parts of the world, like Southeast Asia and stuff like that, for you to be a great PC gamer. In America, we don't have internet cafes that are affordable. So you have to be at least middle class, like pretty well off historically, to afford a PC, as opposed to, usually consoles are cheaper, right, than PCs are. And so, if you can afford a PC, you probably have a pretty cushy lifestyle, and that drains a lot of the motivation that people have to be good, because it's not their entire lifestyle or socioeconomic status that is in the balance. And it's kind of shitty for the players who have to, like, they're ride or die on esports, because sometimes they're not good enough or they fall off through no fault of their own, and then their lives are fucked. And that's really depressing, guys. But I think the motivation is definitely higher among a lot of the Asian teams and players.
And also, as a corollary, if it isn't for you, random Korean player, I've got a line of 1,000 people at the door that'll do it if you want. So you want to shit or get off the pot. The problem in NA is people actually, dude, you know this, behind the scenes, people even say these things out loud and go, well, yeah, he is like sort of a troublesome person to work with, but he's my best player, so what am I going to do? And they think they turn to you as all like, you're going to agree with them? Like, well, yeah, you just have to fuck the whole team then and have no chance at Worlds. What? Like, what are you talking about? Like, people don't realise you have to. I think the other thing as well for me is, NA is trapped in a cycle of being stuck as a prisoner of the moment. It's all about tomorrow. It's, do we win this weekend's game? Do we do a little bit better than last weekend? Like, there's no sort of like longer term, like, you're not really developing players. You're not really developing a system. You're not really working on things that level up and then, 8 months in now, our back. No, it feels like people are just working on the same small things week after week after week after week. And that applies to Champions Queue. Because I think players genuinely, Monty, think solo queue and Champions Queue is just warm up. I don't think they know it's practice as well.
Well, and there's no pressure on these players because they're not going to get replaced because you only have a finite number of import slots, and the players literally, guys, the way GMing in NA works is that you lock in like you're the best resident players you can, and then you try and fill in with the import players around them, right? And you guys say this is another thing that I would just love to test actually, because people say, well, I don't like LCS because it's not domestic players anymore, and I can't watch North American players. I think you guys don't like it because you suck at international competitions, and you realize you're watching a B tier product at the very best. And when we have China, Korea, and Europe that are all cast in English, you always have better choices of games to watch. Always. Okay. So I think the real reason, and like nobody would be like, Bjergsen is the most famous player in NA. He's not NA. Of course, people love Cord JJ. There are imports. People love Whippo, right? It's their personalities and their accessibility that makes you like them. But factually, guys, the import rule is preventing NA from being its most competitive because there is no threat to replace many of these NA players who are underperforming. Yes. And I think that we could have an entire league with 0 NA players, and I think you guys would watch it more if they did better internationally. I think you don't actually give a fuck that these players aren't from NA. I think you give a fuck that the games are shit, which is what I care about too.
No, the best thing, by the way, Monty, you could, for real, go back to the first year of Summoning Insight, and this is what we always told you. We always told you the reason Riot has that scuffed-ass Worlds format, and there's one Worlds a year, there was no MSI back then, is because what they want is to, as long as possible, maintain the conman pretense that NA can ever compete. And the problem you have now, Monty, is the conman tried to stay in town after he sold everyone 100 batches of snake oil. And now people have started realising that don't seem to actually get better now. And isn't that his brother who was in the wheelchair and could dance on? People are finally figuring out, Riot. So the problem now is you shit out a lock, aren't you? It's lasted 10 years. You had a good run. I'll give you a fair play. You got 5 to 6 years of copium, but it's over now.
It is very impressive that you could delude TSM fans for this long. I mean, those guys are dumb, but you can only be so dumb.
Exactly.
After 10 years.
Exactly. Listen, I would have made the joke, how many TSM fans does it take to, screw in a light bulb, as many as you want because they're all morons and they just prefer to sit in the darkness and bitch. I'm wrong. It just takes 1 million of them. It just takes 1 million. That's the answer. Once you hit the threshold, eventually they figure it out for themselves. Also, by the way, let's be real. I'm also almost certain, I've noticed this years ago, I don't need you to believe me as a random fan shitter. You can think whatever the fuck you want. That's how my content works. But I've used that tool, Monty, Reddit Enhancement Suite, which is called RES, right? It allows you, one of the features famously is you can tag a Reddit account. So one thing I did years ago as a social experiment is I tagged people who say shitty things or are biased or even, here's a good one you might like. I didn't ever say it publicly, but I always knew which Richard Zoltz were on the CSGO sub, and I always had that tagged, so I knew that hilarious, weird account speaking in the way he does was just him wrecking everyone. Even though fans didn't for years, but I sort of liked it. It was my own little secret, So when I do this, right, it allowed me to see patterns that you won't see if you just look at random usernames. And Monty, I'm not exaggerating. Most Reddit threads are TSM fans skewing it insanely into a TSM world. That's why they even have to use that whack counter of that's not true. Because every once in a while, if Reggie does something really extreme, there's a negative thread. It's oh, is that all it takes to get one negative fucking thread? Same with Fnatic fans in Europe, by the way. These are the fucking ultras. These are the zealots that just run. They almost remind me of K-pop stars. They just constantly control what everyone's allowed to think and the consensus. So as a result, let's be real. Another reason people thinks it sucks is because TSM was the bottom of the fucking table. You're just hating on the fact TSM sucks dick now. That's not my fault. I didn't make them suck. I actually think that's somewhat hilarious. I even thought, by the way, there's proof, by the way, also, that no one ever will watch all the games in an LCS season because they just proved it, Monty. If TSM's last place, now everyone should be watching the bad games. No one watched those games. Everyone was like, I'm not watching. I'm out. Logically, TSM should have had banger last place game numbers, the greatest of all time, surely.
Also, by the way, all the fans complained about performance, not the fact that they had these new import players on the team.
Oh, no.
Just gonna point that out. Nobody was like, well, Double Lift's not on the team anymore. I love Double Lift.
Put it this way, I still don't even know who any of those players are, Monty. The only time they ever showed any personality was mildly criticising the org or something. That's about it. They haven't said anything. Who are they? Who the fuck are they?
All available evidence points to you guys being full of bullshit on the I only want to watch NA players front.
Exactly. Well, we should have a segment like that, Press X to doubt. We bring in the fan excuse. It's I'm going to take doubt on that one. Is it believe them or doubt? I'm going doubt. That's a doubt.
But besides, it's just if NA, for example, if Team Liquid won Worlds, here's a very simple question. Do you think viewership of NA would go up significantly?
Go through the roof.
It would go through the roof, guys.
It would literally double. Yeah, for real. It would
go through the roof.
By the way, this isn't even something that I have to guess about. You know what, Monty? When people like in CSGO, Simple became the #1 player, and not only Na'Vi, but 3 or 4 teams from that, the viewership went through the roof from that region, of course.
Here's a question to Monte haters, by the way. Here's a question to Monte haters. So when I first got to Korea, the Korean viewership wasn't super good. It was right after, even though we had seen a Korean team in the 2012 World Finals. So I get there late 2012 after that happens. And Korean viewership is very low. So one of these things must be true. Either Korean teams are the reason why, and their victories at Worlds, especially in 2013, and their hype finals and their performance, are the reason why people watched more of the English stream in Korea. Or it's me, guys. Maybe it was me. Now, I'm not deluded enough.
Are you trying to trap him into it? Exactly. That's it, right? Sophie's choice one for the Monty here. Yeah, exactly.
So it was either my casting, or it's because you guys watched them because they were good, even if they weren't part of your culture. One of those things has to be true.
That's the 2 buttons meme. There you go. You're the 2 buttons meme. There you go. Exactly. So, you pick. You can pick, guys. You can pick
which one it was. Now, I don't think it was me personally. Maybe I kept people around a little bit, right? Yeah. Like, certainly, I think I helped, but I think mostly it was like Faker. That would be my assessment.
I'll even take the 2 points together, though. One thing that you and Dor inarguably did is because you both had a background as fans from StarCraft, you understood early on you have to make a character out of this guy. But guess what? If he's just a boring 15-year-old Korean kid, his character can't be his real personality. It has to be what he is in the game. So we have to create his character from the fact that, wow, Insect's such a crazy guy, all in all the time. Wow, so immortal score, never dies, like mad, like, wow, the hooks, like, they created the images, like the players did the rest, yes. But even in a small sense, that did help humanize those players, make them into the stars.
Well, we knew that was very deliberate. That was very deliberate. There were 2 things that we did very deliberately. One of them was that, which is like we have to create hooks with these players to get people invested. And the other thing we did was we created the whole like OGN Legion hashtag. So we created a fan identity for people who watched OGN, and the emotes were part of that, the the rotations and like the Doa face and like the cake fan and like we created this identity in these memes that made people feel like they were part of it was a subculture for LoL fans.
Because that was the cool thing. Basically, what they did is they made it like a hipster thing to watch the LCK. So as a result, like, it was now cool that you were up live, and even though it's like in America and it's late at night and that, it made it a cool thing to do.
Yep. It was like a secret club.
And then you could just go on Reddit then and sort of be like, I am like, who the bloody hell are these LCS players? I was just watching, Flame and Shard. You're like, you can be an elitist. It's brilliant. Everyone wants to secretly be the one who knows more. You want to be a know-all, don't you? Exactly.
Yep. So that's things we did very, very deliberately at the time. But yeah, this is all to say, if you guys start winning, then nobody's going to give a shit. It's not like Faker lacks fans. Guys, I hate to tell you this, but Faker's favorite drink is water. He's not a super interesting human being. He's a fucking brilliant player. Yeah. But he's not. He's pretty boring in real life. I'll tell you that.
It's a quick test for how committed they are to the idea about NA players. Here's an option, fans. I've just come into a VC and I've got $50 million. Which would you like me to do next year? I can bring all the top collegiate players and all the academy players and send them to a mega boot camp, and we can get Golden Glue in there, and we can have Darshan teaching them, and at the end we'll pay them all an incredible salary to play in whatever LCS team you want, or I'll sign Faker to the LCS team of your choice. Now, A, which one would you want? And B, which do you think would increase viewership? Because if it's what you say, then logically this wouldn't help really old Korean players. The LCS would have double the viewership tomorrow if Faker joined. Let's be absolutely clear. It would be tomorrow double the viewership, at least. Maybe 3 times, maybe 3.
Yep.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.